Everyone. There's only a few seats up here. We're expecting quite this large crowd, but if you find a spot, we'll begin today's events by presenting and posting of the American flag by the color guard of the U.S. Naval Sea Cadets of Cincinnati. And we'll follow that with a Pledge of Allegiance and our national anthem led by Carly Daniels. Carly is the daughter of Lieutenant Commander Tom Healy, commanding officer of the Navy Reserve Center, Cincinnati, Naval Operations Support Center. So if those seated would please rise if you're able. Let's begin. Sea Cadets, post the colors.
Please join me in the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Oh, say, can you see by the dawn's early light what so proudly we hailed at the twilight's last gleaming, whose broad stripes and bright stars through the perilous fight o'er the ramparts we watched were so gallantly streaming, and the rockets were there amongst the steam air, they forth through the night, that our flag was still there. Oh, say does that star-spangled banner yet wave o'er the land of the free and the home of the brave?
Left midwheel, port. Forward, port. Ready. Oh. Yes, perfect.
Thank you, Carly. Thank you, Sea Cadets. So let's begin. Thank you all for coming today. What a great day, and on behalf of the Cincinnati Council of the Navy League of Cincinnati and the Cincinnati base of the United States Submarine Veterans, welcome to the arrival of these first pieces of our Cincinnati namesake submarine, USS Cincinnati. My name's Joseph Japp. It's my great privilege and pleasure to welcome you all here today serve on the board of the Navy League of Cincinnati, along with Dick Young, right here, of the sub-vets. We've been working together to put together this pieces of Cincinnati for the past 13 years, and finally here we are today. I don't know about you guys, but there's really no other place I'd rather be this afternoon. My wife had me scheduled to babysit so she could attend a baby shower, so it was kind of submarine or baby shower. So I'm here today for USS Cincinnati. Let me introduce today's guests. We'll be offering a few remarks this afternoon. I'm going to introduce them in the order that you'll be hearing from them. It's an honor to have with us today Nancy Keating. Nancy was the sponsor of USS Cincinnati back when the boat was launched in 1977, and with her is her husband, our former Congressman Bill Keating. Hamilton County Commissioner Todd Portune, steadfast supporter of USS Cincinnati for over 15 years. Todd was serving on Cincinnati City Council, I think, back then, and was intrigued by the idea of USS Cincinnati. Let's say he kind of got on board with it. Thanks, Todd, for being here, and it didn't hurt that his brother once dated my little sister. We also have Phil Castellini, Chief Operating Officer of our own Cincinnati Reds. You may have noticed the ballpark right over there. Phil has to get back to the team in a bit for tonight's game, but Phil, thanks for being here today, taking time to be with us. Dick Young, as I mentioned, he's the founder of the Cincinnati Submarine Veterans Base here in town. Dick and I are shipmates from USS Benjamin Franklin, a missile submarine 40 years ago. This summer we were on board together. And he will introduce retired Navy Commander Gus Krause, right here. Gus is a World War II submarine veteran, 11 combat patrols, and he lives right here in Cincinnati. Lieutenant Commander Tom Healy, we just heard from his daughter Carly. He'll introduce retired Navy Captain Tim France, also lives in the Cincinnati area. Former commanding officer of missile submarine USS Francis Scott Key. You heard his song a little earlier. And we also have Cincinnati Navy League President Steve Tagarello. And Steve will introduce today's featured speaker, retired Navy captain, and from 1984 to 1987, CEO of USS Cincinnati herself, once stood right up here on the top of that sail, all the way from Knoxville, Tennessee. Let's have a warm Cincinnati welcome for Skipper Bob Hawthorne and our other speakers here today. So thank you, Mrs. Keating, and officers and gentlemen, for being here today, sharing your time with us. Now, an important part of the Navy League mission is to educate our local community about the importance of our nation's sea services to our national defense. That's the Navy, the Marines, the Coast Guard, the Merchant Marine. So this USS Cincinnati project is a part of Navy League's educational mission. And what better way than bringing about 100 tons of education right here to Cincinnati? When we put these pieces back together, they're going to connect the people of Cincinnati very powerfully to what USS Cincinnati represents. Just one small part of the 50-year global conflict of the Cold War, which began even before World War II ended and included Korea and Vietnam. So let's start with a bit of education, at least for the non-quals in the audience. This large black piece right here with the holes in it, that's the lower half of the conning tower called the sail. The upper half will be arriving in October. The sail houses the upper portion of the periscopes, antennas, sonar, radar, snorkel, other stuff. All those holes you see are access ports to be able to get to all that equipment. Cover plates will be coming to us in October with the rest of the sail. And once we get the upper and lower half put back together, that entire sail will be again 26 feet long, 18 feet tall, 6 feet wide. And with the sailplanes right here, the wingspan of about 31 feet, that whole thing's going to weigh about 50 tons, and we have to find a place to put it down the riverfront. After that, the submarine itself was 6,000 tons, 360 feet long. That's goalpost to goalpost on a football field. So if the bow were to start right about where we are, the propeller would be somewhere over there across 3rd Street, back where those buildings are. The diameter of the hull is 33 feet. That's 3 stories high, so you've got to get an idea here. If you put the sail on top of that, if the boat was sitting right here today, the top of the sail would be about where the top of the building is. Sailplanes on the trailer over here, like I said, have a wingspan of 31 feet, 12 feet front to back. Those things weigh 18 tons. Sailplanes go up and down. They control the depth of the submarine once underwater. They'll be replaced back on the top of the bottom half. You can see the hole where they kind of cut those loose to be able to transport them here. Put the sailplanes back in place. We'll put the top of the sail back on. And then we'll have that wholesale assembly reassembled. And then finally, the far end of the street down there, that gigantic mass of metal, that's the upper rudder. There's another one just like it that sticks down from the bottom of the submarine. This is the half you can see that sticks up out of the water. We've got some pictures of submarines here, and you can see the model submarine over there on the trailer. You can get an idea of the relationship between the front end, the back end, and how far away the stern sits. That rudder piece over there is 17 feet tall, 13 feet wide, and it's a 44,000-pound load. And you can see part of the hull where they cut it away from the submarine, and then that kind of rounded part sticking out from the bottom, that's how they turn it. There's a hydraulic mechanism underneath there. So one concept of putting back these pieces together, USS Cincinnati Cold War Memorials, pour a full-size kind of concrete replica of the above-water portion of the hull. We'll put the sail on top of it. We'll put the rudder back where it begins. Put kind of a shallow water reflecting pool around there. It'll show how a submarine is, what it looks like in the water. We don't get many submarines here on the Ohio River in Cincinnati, so you see that on a couple of the banners we've got around here, and on our Facebook page shows some good renditions of what that might look like. And we hope that'll become kind of an icon for Cincinnati, much like the fountain on Fountain Square. The memorial will be a fitting place to hold some patriotic gatherings. It'll be another feature attraction we can add to the banks and the riverfront park. And I know some of you submariners in the crowd are kind of disappointed we couldn't save the whole boat to bring up here. Just a few problems bringing a 6,000-ton, 360-foot-long submarine to Cincinnati. One of them is that the boat needs about 25 feet of water to float. And it locks in the Ohio River and the Mississippi River only 9 feet deep, so there's a little bit of a transport problem there. The Navy also said there's still some classified features on the USS Cincinnati they just can't put on display. So there were 3 prior Navy warships named for Cincinnati. There was a Civil War gunboat, there was an 1890s era cruiser, there was a World War I era cruiser also. All those are gone. They've all disappeared into history and they're gone. So we're fortunate to be able to preserve these parts of USS Cincinnati here for us. So with that background, it's now my honor to introduce to you Nancy Keating. She was selected by then President Ford to be the sponsor to launch USS Cincinnati. Cold day 36 years ago, February 19th, 1977. Newport News, Virginia, crossed the water from Norfolk Navy Base. Nancy Keating gave USS Cincinnati its name, broke the bottle of champagne on the bow to start the boat's slide into the water, where it served our nation faithfully for nearly 20 years. To share a few remembrances of that event, Nancy Keating, sponsor of USS Cincinnati, and her husband, Bill Keating.
I hope you can all hear me.
Yes.
Good. And I think we should all give Joe Jack a big applause for all he's done to get us all together. And before I start, my 2 daughters are here. And at the ceremony, many, many years ago, they were my maids of honor. And now they're going to come up here and hold me up. This is my daughter, Nancy Rowe, and this is Susie Keating. So. I just want to tell you the story about how I got through this. It was a scary, scary thing to do. And it all started back in 1977 when President Jerry Ford asked me to christen the ship. And I thought, oh my gosh, I don't know what that's all about. That's really scary. But I was just so excited. I knew it would be a lot of fun. And I heard these stories. The one was about Bess Truman, and she was so frustrated when she tried to break the bottle. She asked for a hammer. And there was a lady, Ann Armstrong, and she tried 13 times to break it. And finally, she broke it. And her problem was she had a California wine. And the bottles in California are much, much heavier. So that's why it wouldn't break. So I really wanted to break it the first time. And I thought, I'm going to ask my 7 bright, intelligent children to help give me a clue on what to do. So we got around the kitchen table and started talking, and a couple of the swimmers said, "Practice, practice." I thought, practice? How do you practice doing that? And they said, "Well, we'll get some empty wine bottles." So they collected the bottles. I didn't ask where they found them. I don't know where they came from. And I said, "Okay, we held the bottles. Now what?" And they said, "Well, you break them." And I said, "Where are we going to break them?" And finally, we decided there's an iron pole in our garage. So we went down the garage and we wrapped up the bottle in turkey's towel. We held a garbage can. And I started swimming. And it took about 3 swims. I broke the bottle. And I tried 2 more times. I still was able to break the bottle. And I said, "I'm ready." And the kid said, "Oh, you're having so much fun. Can't we do it too?" So we finished breaking the bottles. And on February the 19th, 1977, we flew up to Newport News shipbuilding. And oh, the place was filled with handsome sailors. Oh, I've never seen so many sailors. And they were all so nice. And we went to a building, and they told me what I had to do. And we had a little lunch, and then we went out for the ceremony. And my 2 daughters were with me, and they showed me where to hit the boat, and how to swim, and what to say. And so I took the bottle and I said, "I christen you USS Cincinnati," or USS Cincinnati. And I hit so hard, and the bottle just shattered, and the wine sprayed all over everybody. That's the end of my story. But I have one more thing to say. If you're ever asked to christen a boat, just get some wine bottles and come on to my house.
I don't think I can keep up with that. In any event, I want to echo what Nancy just said. Joseph Japp has really worked hard to make this day come to a fruition. And he's worked for 13 years, persevered through all the different things you have to do to work through a bureaucracy to make it come true. So I really join with Nancy in saying Joe Japp is sort of our hero for today. One thing I want to add to what Nancy said. When she broke the bottle on the hull of the submarine, on the bow of the submarine, it slipped into the water. And there were Navy officers around the rim of the submarine, and they played anchors away. And if you ever want to say something was awesome, that was awesome. To see it go down and play anchors away and see all these Navy men saluting. It was really, really impressive, and it's a sight I'll never forget. My real mission here right now is to introduce Todd Portune. Todd has been a great public service in this community for many years. He's serving now as county commissioner, and he's played a large role in helping Joe Japp make this day possible. So I hope that when you hear from him, you'll give him an applause, because he's a wonderful man. He's a true public service, and he's done a very good job. Thank you very much.
Congressman Keating, thank you so much for that introduction and for your remarks and memories, and Nancy's as well, of the launch of the USS Cincinnati. Ladies and gentlemen, good afternoon. My name is Todd Portune, and I'm before you today as Hamilton County Commissioner and as Chair of Hamilton County Homeland Security and Emergency Management. But really I'm here because it's been my privilege and pleasure to work for over 15 years in trying to bring the USS Cincinnati home to the shore of Cincinnati and Hamilton County. And today we can say mission accomplished with respect to that. My job is really to talk today about the memorial that we have planned and in store for the public in recognition and in honor and in memory of the men and women who served not just on the USS Cincinnati or in the Navy, but in all of our armed services, in winning the Cold War and in representing and serving our nation and protecting our freedoms in all armed conflicts that the United States of America has been a part of. Before I say that, however, I want to echo the comments first about Joe Japp. Joe has been my partner in this effort for over 13 years, and he has had the real vision, not just of bringing the sub home, but of what this memorial can be. He had the contacts, he reached out, he did all the hard work, and if there's any footnote or other recognition in the memorial to how this came about, we're going to make sure that Joe Japp is enshrined in that, because Joe's just been a wonderful and a terrific partner, and I thank him for everything he has done. It also stands to reason that we honor and thank as well the members of the military, the armed services, both present and past, who are with us here today. Those who are seated in front of me, many of whom are wearing the hats bearing the name USS Cincinnati, who undoubtedly served on the submarine. But I look at all the young men and women in uniform with us today, and you veterans who served previously. We owe all of you a tremendous debt of gratitude. We're also very proud of you. And ladies and gentlemen, let's please give all our members of the military and armed services a round of applause. So after 15 years, we're here. And we have these tremendous iconic elements of the USS Cincinnati here in front of you on the trailers that made the trip cross country, that are going to be forever enshrined in a memorial representing not only the namesake USS Cincinnati and its invaluable contribution to winning the Cold War, but also as a part of a memorial in honor and in memory and in recognition of members of the military who served during that time period, members of the military who served in all wars. But what will be unique about this memorial as well is we hope also to tell the story of the unique civilian connection to contributions in winning the Cold War during those 50 years from Cincinnati. For example, in and around the area of the Fernald uranium processing plant and the issues that occurred in that part of Hamilton County, and the civilian sacrifices that were made, along with the sacrifices of the people who worked there, both in the armed services and civilians. That plant was instrumental in us winning the Cold War. Individuals who worked at General Electric Aviation in Evendale, and the many engines that were built at that facility that then were a part of larger tools of war that helped to defend our nation, both past and present, that are still in service today, representing us and defending us. The Cold War full-body radiation experiments and psychotropic drug experiments that took place at University of Cincinnati Hospital, something that contributed not only to the defense of the nation, but also something that we remember as a chapter where civilians made tremendous sacrifices, including loss of life without their knowledge and without their consent. And we remember that period and chapter in the history, and we remember those civilians from Cincinnati and Hamilton County who were part of that sacrifice. Stories like that as well, the civilian contribution from our region, along with the military contribution that won the Cold War, that was all a part of the sacrifices that we made as a nation for over 50 years in defending freedom and preserving liberty. That's what will be a part of the story told at this Cold War and Veterans Memorial, that the USS Cincinnati will be the iconic symbol of. Now, where that's going to be is here. And when I say here, I mean the central riverfront. That is the preferred location. Looking around at all of what's been done over the past few years in making the vision of the banks a reality, the excitement that's going on, the new development, the vitality and vibrancy of our community, our city, our county, and our region, we believe that this memorial will be one of the true gems of what the investment of all of the people of the region in Greater Cincinnati's riverfront can be. There are several locations that are in mind. I'd love to be able to tell you exactly which one of those it's going to be. Unfortunately, we haven't quite nailed it down yet. But we have a great partner in the Cincinnati Park Board. They've done a lot of design work for us. They've helped to identify locations. And we hope very soon to be able to announce the permanent location where these elements of the USS Cincinnati will forever be preserved in representing this wonderful chapter in the history of our city, our county, and our nation. That's the vision, ladies and gentlemen. I think it's a wonderful vision that you all can continue to be a part of. I'm sure if Joe hasn't said it now, he will before he closes the ceremony on telling you where you can go to look up, to be a part of this effort still, to contribute, to help make this vision become a reality, not just in building, but in preserving for all time. But it is a wonderful thing and a wonderful legacy that we all can be a part of. There's another story of the USS Cincinnati that I left out that is about to be told, and it's my privilege now to introduce someone who is no stranger to Greater Cincinnati. He is a key member of a family that has brought great life and great success to gosh, what would I call it? The seminal professional sports team, not just in Cincinnati, but in all of professional sports. Our Cincinnati Reds that are in the thick of a pennant race right now, and we know not only are they going to win the NL Central, but they're going to win the World Series. And that was a cheap attempt to get applause, Phil, and I think maybe I succeeded in it. But there is a connection between the USS Cincinnati and the Cincinnati Reds. And to tell that story, it's my honor to introduce to all of you the Chief Operating Officer, a man who is responsible for so much good work at Great American Ballpark and with the Cincinnati Reds that make the Reds the entertaining and exciting not only sports opportunity, but entertainment opportunity for all of us. Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome Mr. Phil Castellini, Cincinnati Reds.
Thanks, Todd. I think what they're all thinking is you got to win a home playoff game first to get to the World Series, so we're working on that as well. I have a particular interest in this project. I'm also involved with the Parks Board, and this Riverfront Park has been a long time in coming. The development between these two ballparks, the ballpark and the football stadium, have been a long time in coming, and so I think this represents one of the coolest elements that'll be in the Riverfront Park, and the connections are unbelievable. The arrival of this ceremony and the memorial have been based on a lot of people's hard work, not the least of which is Commissioner Portune. Thank you for your efforts. Other elected officials, city and county administrators, but most importantly, and he's been referenced, Joe Jabb, thanks for all that you have done to bring this to Cincinnati, and other U.S. Navy veterans as well have worked tirelessly to make this a possibility here in our riverfront. Baseball is America's game. And without the service and sacrifice of our armed forces, we would not be free to play the game that we all cherish. On behalf of the Cincinnati Reds and Major League Baseball, I'd like to extend a heartfelt thank you to the veterans that are here with us today, to those who are currently serving in the armed forces, and for those who service our country every day. Thank you so very much for what you do. And as Todd mentioned, there's a particular, you've already got the reference to the USS Cincinnati, but in particular reference to the era in which the sub was in the water, certainly during the 60s and then 70s, the Big Red Machine in the back-to-back World Series, there was a diesel engine within the bowels of the sub that piloted it around that was called indeed the Big Red Machine, a huge, as I understand, diesel engine that weighs some 40,000 pounds or more. And Todd and I have talked about ways that we might be able to make a connection to the ballpark and we continue to work on that. But an interesting tie to the team as well as the city with this sub. So again, we're grateful for its inclusion in this proximity to our ballpark. So again, I thank you all for being here today. I thank the gentlemen behind me for their service, in particular their additional service to bring this memorial to Cincinnati. Thanks, go Red Legs, and hopefully we will bring a World Series to this town this year. Go Red Legs.
My name is Dick Young, and on behalf of the United States Submarine Veterans Cincinnati Base, I would like to welcome you all here. This is truly a special day for our community. On a personal note, it's also kind of a special day for me, because 44 years ago today, this date, August 24th, at this hour, I was a few blocks up the road here at the Federal Building, raising my hand, swearing to protect the greatest country in the world. I would like to echo everything everybody said about Joe Japp. Joe and I have been working 13 years together on this, and it's really a red letter day for our community. And by the way, the big red machine on the submarine that Phil was referring to is the only diesel in the service that we know of that was actually painted red and not the navy gray. So, and it's still red, and it will be here sometime in October. Thank you. Everybody else stole my thunder about Joe. I was going to speak at length on Joe and the time and effort he's put into this, but without him being the driving force behind this effort, it wouldn't be here today. I would also like to thank the Hamilton County Commissioners, and in particular Mr. Portune. They're the ones that sent the official request into the Navy for all these parts, and they're the ones that got the approval for it. So thank you. I would also like to thank a member of our base, and I don't see where he's at. Oh, he's over. Joel, raise your hand. Joel Howe. He is the owner of all these trucks and a member of the Cincinnati base. So thank you, Joel. You did a wonderful job. Now it's my pleasure to introduce a personal friend of mine, and he's a personal hero of mine. He spent 30 years in the Navy. He's what we call a Mustang. And a Mustang is a person who starts out being an enlisted person who's a seaman and works his way up to being a commissioned officer. Gus enlisted in the Navy in 1939. In 1941, he was qualified in submarines, which means you know everything there is to know about an inside of a submarine. All you submariners are aware of what that is. During World War II, Gus made 11 war patrols in the South Pacific. He was a member of the S-36, which, due to being depth charged so many times, and Gus was depth charged many times, it ran aground, and all the crew members, fortunately, were rescued. But Gus, as we speak today, is the only living member that is left of that submarine. In 1953, Gus went to Officer Candidate School and was commissioned in ensign. He once told me that he rode every submarine made that was nuclear powered from the Nautilus up till the time he retired. Gus spent many years after he became commissioned serving the Navy around the world in Navy submarine support facilities. In 1969, he retired as a commander in the Navy. He is my personal friend, and I'd like to introduce to you Mr. Walter Gus Krause.
I would like to ask two friends of mine who are submarine veterans of World War II to stand up, please. Frank Weiss, Harold Reddick. If there are any other submarine veterans of World War II here, please raise your hand or step forward. Well, and I'd like to also ask if are there any veterans of World War II who were not in submarines? Very good. Thank you. Well, you can see our numbers are dwindling. And I'm glad that this USS Cincinnati finally made it here, because I know that Joe Japp and Dick Young have been working on this for some time, and it takes a lot of their time, believe me. And I'm so happy to see that the first part of the project is here. There's a lot to do yet, but this is a big start. Thank you. In mid-1940, I reported to the Asiatic Fleet and then received orders to the USS S-36 in August of that year. It had been my hope to be on one of the newer boats, like the P boats, more spacious, air-conditioned and so forth. And the S-36 was a kind of a disappointment because it was the oldest submarine in the Asiatic Fleet. And however, with camaraderie that we had with the small crew, and plus I had an upbeat attitude, and we soon overcame the obstacles and many imperfections that persisted on such an old S-boat. We had no showers, very little water, and we had no air conditioning, and our propulsion was on 2 diesel engines, direct drive. So it was operating in equatorial waters. We had temperatures anywhere from 95 to 120 during the day when we submerged. It was miserable, believe me, but we came through it. And we were glad when the hatch opened at night to charge batteries so we could get some fresh air. When we got to port, we were all eager to go ashore, and but I can tell you that no amount of aftershave lotion or fufu would eliminate that odor, that obvious odor that you had, and that's why they called us pig boat sailors. On December the 2nd, 1941, in Manila Bay, our skipper was summoned to the subtender for a briefing. As he left the boat, he ordered our exec to strip ship and make for war readiness. That was December the 2nd. We all pitched in, all non-essentials, small brow, hatch covers, awnings, mooring lines, all that paraphernalia were taken from the boat and taken to the tender. 3 hours after the skipper returned, we were underway for Cape Bolinao near the Lingayen Gulf on the west side of Luzon. That's an island in the Philippines. We anchored in that beautiful harbor on a 4 December, and that's where we were when Pearl Harbor was bombed. During our second patrol, after many nightmarish incidents, we ran aground on Tacamacan Reef and Makassar Straits. That's between the island of Borneo and Celebes. After 28 hours, a Dutch freighter rescued us as we scuttled ship, eventually took us to Surabaya, Java, and we were ordered to various submarines. I received orders to the Snapper during World War II. As I told you before, I made 11 war patrols. In terms of engineering, communications, weaponry, sonar, overall endurance, today's submarines bear little resemblance to those used in World War II. We, the forerunners of submarine warfare, congratulate with pride all those dedicated to submarine service today. May our good Lord guide them safely home. Thank you.
Good afternoon. My name is Lieutenant Commander Tom Healy. I'm the commanding officer of the Navy Operational Support Center here in Cincinnati, which is a reserve center. And so I represent active duty Navy today and also our reservists. And I've got a contingent of sailors over here. A round of applause for them. When the Navy League asked me if we could support this event, I absolutely jumped at the chance. This is such a wonderful event and a wonderful opportunity for the greater Cincinnati area to have a piece of Navy history. I can tell you, I never thought the Navy would send me to Ohio, and but here I am, and look at how many Navy retired and veterans we have right here in this city. So it's a great opportunity. It's also somewhat fitting as I began my Navy career in an anti-submarine helicopter squadron, learning how to blow these things up. And here we are with pieces of a submarine coming here to Cincinnati. So it was a little easier in a helicopter. I could shoot them, but they couldn't shoot me back, so it's kind of unfair. But I also spent in college as a midshipman. I spent 2 weeks on USS Olympia, which is a Los Angeles class attack submarine similar to the Cincinnati, and we had a casualty, so we had to putt for 2 weeks on the surface. And for those of you in submarines know that a submarine doesn't ride real well on the surface, and those 2 weeks were enough to make me know that I didn't want to go submarines. But I'm really here to introduce someone who's very renowned in the submarine community. Captain Tim France, who commanded a ballistic missile submarine. And for those of you, most of you probably know that without the fine mariners in the sub community, the outcome of the Cold War might have been entirely different than it was. For it was the nuclear triad of intercontinental ballistic missiles, long-range strategic bombers, and especially ballistic missile submarines that provided the necessary nuclear deterrent, which kept the Cold War from turning into a World War III hot war. Of the three, the most difficult threat for our adversaries to counter was the SSBN. Thanks to the anti-submarine capabilities of fast attack boats like the USS Cincinnati, the larger SSBNs could hide in protected water space and wait for the dreadful orders that all of humanity hoped would never be sent. It is my pleasure to introduce the former commanding officer of one of these boats, Captain Tim France. Captain France completed nuclear power training at submarine school and reported to the USS Hado SSN 604, his first submarine in 1968. He subsequently served as navigator on 2 other submarines before spending 2 years on the staff of the Atlantic Submarine Force in Norfolk. That was followed by a tour as executive officer on a fleet ballistic missile submarine, and then as commanding officer of the USS Francis Scott Key SSBN 657 Gold crew from 1985 to 1988. Following that command, he served 2 years as Chief Staff Officer of Submarine Squadron 18 in Charleston, and finally 2 years as Chief Staff Officer of Commander Navy Base Charleston. He retired after 27 years of active duty as a Navy captain in 1993. His first job after the Navy brought him to the Cincinnati area, where he worked at the Fernald Environmental Management Project as an environmental engineer. He completed an MBA at Miami University in 2001 and taught in the management department at Miami for a year. That was followed by 6 years as a programmer and analyst for the IT department at Miami until he retired in 2009. And he's been traveling and enjoying retirement ever since. Captain, come on up.
Thanks for that introduction. Members of the Cincinnati Cold War Memorial Project team, distinguished guests, USS Cincinnati crew members, shipmates and friends, ladies and gentlemen, good afternoon. My thanks to the project team for asking me to say a few words. Today we are here to welcome these pieces of the USS Cincinnati, which will become the centerpiece of the Cincinnati Cold War Memorial. As time passes, memory of that time in our nation's history fades away, but it is something that we should all remember and all look back on as a time when our country was threatened by the evil empire of the Soviet Union, and we as a country met the challenge. We expended the resources and sacrificed our national treasure and demonstrated great dedication and commitment to win the Cold War. So it's been hinted to, but let me explain. There are 2 basic types of submarines. You can think of it like we have what we call the attack submarine, like the Cincinnati, and then we had the fleet ballistic missile submarines, affectionately known as boomers. And these two types of submarines were similar. If you think about the Air Force, where you have fighter planes and bombers, that's sort of the relationship between the attacks and the boomers. During my 27-year Navy career, I served on 5 different submarines, 2 fast attacks and 3 FBMs and 1 fast attack. Of course, the Cincinnati was a fast attack submarine. It was the 6th boat of the Los Angeles class. It was built in Newport News Shipbuilding in Norfolk, Newport News, Virginia. I was on the commissioning crew of the USS Memphis, which was the boat ahead of the Cincinnati at Newport News. So I'm very familiar with the ship. And in fact, 30 years ago this month, 33 years ago this month, in 1980, I rowed the USS Cincinnati from down in the Bahamas off Andros Island up to Norfolk. That was part of what we did when we were on the staff. We went out and rowed other submarines for our own training and to support the submarine crews. But both types of submarines, attacks and boomers, are very important for the Cold War. 4 of the Ohio-class boomers have actually been converted to a new type of submarine we didn't have before. It's a guided missile submarine, an SSGN. So there are 4 submarines in that category. So I'm here today to talk about boomers, since that's what I had command of. As the Cold War became more intense and the nuclear arsenals of the United States and the USSR became larger and larger, a policy of nuclear deterrence was developed. As mentioned before, in addition to the manned bombers and nuclear-tipped land-based missiles, the need for a survivable deterrent emerged, and thus the Fleet Ballistic Missile Submarine. The nuclear submarine, developed under the leadership of Admiral Hyman Rickover, came to fruition in the USS Nautilus, which was commissioned in 1955. And this was a realization of Jules Verne's true submersible from his novel 20,000 Leagues Under the Sea. For now we had a vessel that did not have to be concerned about refueling or coming in for fuel or to get other things. The only limiting item on a submarine is the food that we eat. We can't make that. 4 years later, in 1969, the USS George Washington, our first boomer, was commissioned. With its 16 Polaris missiles, the Fleet Ballistic Missile Submarine became a reality. This missile, developed under the leadership of Admiral Bill Rayburn, gave the United States the true deterrent. Boomers were manned with 2 crews to maximize the time that the missiles were in a launch posture. In the next 8 years, 3 classes of boomers were commissioned, culminating in the commissioning of the USS Will Rogers in 1967. The so-called 41 for Freedom were named for famous Americans, and that included the USS Tecumseh, named for the Shawnee chief who was born right in the Cincinnati area, as some of you may know. There was also a Ulysses S. Grant, who was another native of Ohio in this area. The Polaris missile was then replaced by Poseidon missiles for the last 31 boats, and then later on 12 of those 31 were converted to the Trident I missile. These submarines then were replaced by the Ohio class beginning in the 1980s, and the Ohio class are still out there today providing our nation's defense with Trident II missiles. I had the privilege to command the United States ship Francis Scott Key, one of the 41 for Freedom, from 1985 to 1988. My crew and I brought the boat out of a shipyard overhaul through a rigorous shakedown period and then made deterrent patrols out of Kings Bay, Georgia. My gold crew exchanged duty with the blue crew on about 3.5-month rotation. My time on the Key was actually during the final years of the Cold War, but of course we did not know that. As far as we were concerned, when we were underway, we were in a wartime status. We were carrying out our mission of remaining undetected, maintaining continuous communications when we were in the alert posture so we could get a message about our missiles, and then to maintain our missiles ready to fire on 15 minutes notice. It was an awesome responsibility. During shakedown in December 1985, we actually got to shoot a test missile, and that was quite a experience to be able to do that. That you don't get to do very often. It was this launch was actually a milestone for the Trident missile because it was the 100th Trident missile fired from a submarine. Another highlight of my command tour was making a port visit in Bermuda as the first U.S. ballistic missile submarine to visit that port. Our boomers were successful and continue to be successful in their mission of deterrence, as we never had to launch our missiles in response to an attack. Following command, I was assigned to a submarine squadron staff that supported a squadron of boomers, so I continued to ride the boats for another couple of years. I had my last submarine ride on the USS Stonewall Jackson, another of the 41 for Freedom, in September 1990. In addition to the 5 submarines to which I was assigned, I rode another couple of dozen boats for training or to provide support for those crews for a total of about 8 years underwater. It was a great career. In closing, I would be remiss if I did not acknowledge